So let's jump into it about Afro culture. You know, I asked myself, are we talking about black culture, which is what we would think of when we talk about, you know, black culture in the United States, for example? Are we talking about African culture? Are we talking about Afro cultures? Because it's not a monolith, right? There are different cultures in very different countries as well. What I thought I would do is then maybe just talk about how, as black and African people, we are perceived as, this whole group of people. How are we perceived in games? I really wanted to question that with you, and so I brought some examples. Representing African countries in games. So you already know that there aren't so many games that actually show off African countries. But when they do exist, for instance, we have Assassin's Creed Origins, which happens in Egypt. And we have these beautiful Egyptian landscapes, so it's pretty well realized, right? It's very realistic so that people can actually feel that they are in Egypt. We also have Far Cry, which I think was inspired by a Kenyan country, by Kenya. And what we see is that usually they will represent more like the landscapes, more like the savannah, the jungle, the desert, things like that. And you also have Resident Evil 5, where you basically have, let's say, white people come and kill black zombies in some country. Not sure that's like the best depiction. Yeah. I didn't hear that. I'm so sorry. But maybe we can keep it for later, for the questions? Is that okay?
No, it's not a question.
Okay.
So Resident Evil 5 is based off the Kenyan post-election violence that happened in 2007. Mm-hmm. So the black zombies are the Africans who are killing each other. Mm-hmm. And this was based off actually the neighborhood I grew up, Kibera. Mm-hmm. That's the whole area you see in that small slide. Yeah, thank you.
That's good to know. Thank you. So this is to say there aren't so many representation of African countries in general in games, right? Let's keep going and talk about representing Afro characters in gaming. You probably know some of these characters already. So these are more like, I would say, old characters instead of like the more recent ones that we already know of. Everybody knows about Miles Morales, right? From Spider-Man, Miles Morales, who is, I think, adored by many people and who really is one of the most iconic black characters that exist now, especially with positive representation. But let's not forget that Miles Morales didn't really exist before. He existed in the comics, but we already know one Spider-Man. It is not an original story, but it came forward, even if it's a good thing, it still came from another character that already existed in a specific universe. So it's not so much of an original story. You have Eddie from Tekken, right? Which is this Afro-Brazilian character. I think he's probably one of the first 3D black characters in video games. And he comes with his unique style. I think Eddie is very memorable for people who play games like Tekken. And I really enjoyed playing him as well. You have Franklin, of course, from GTA. Franklin is probably one of the characters that people will cite most of the time when I ask, can you give me the name of a black character in video games? Like iconic black characters. Franklin is one of the most cited examples. And then, what's interesting is that Franklin comes from GTA, which is basically a game about crime. And I don't think this is one of the best aspects of talking about black characters in game and creating good examples. It doesn't matter that he has great values as a character in the game. It matters that he is what we think of when we think of citing black characters in video games. And he really participates in this stereotype of, black men being violent. these black men being thieves or gangsters or whatever. More related, I guess, to the black side in America. Other examples, you have Barrett from Final Fantasy, who, unfortunately, with time, we've seen the character evolved in his character design, and with time, his skin started becoming lighter and lighter and lighter. So you wonder why, when originally his skin was really dark. We have Aveline de Grandpré, who is my favorite. She is definitely one of the good examples of black women characters in video games. She is mixed race. She comes from she comes from a father who is a slave master and a mother who has been enslaved, thank you for the word. And, you know, this is a character from Assassin's Creed, Liberation. And she's not so much known, you know, despite being in the franchise Assassin's Creed. I think it's interesting that she's great, but she was released on PS Vita at the time, so not so many people actually know about her. And she was very questioned, you know, amongst gamers because people thought a black woman like that doesn't have a place in the Assassin's Creed franchise. And yet, the game was a huge success. So she's definitely the proof that a game having the main character being a black woman, being a lead in this game, can actually work. Last character I wanted to show you also is Sheva Alomar, also from Resident Evil 5, who we like or don't like. I think what was interesting about her is the way she was being sexualized in the game. So I won't take too much of your time. I wanted to show you other characters, this time especially in esports games. More recent esports games, right? You have Lifeline and Bangalore on the bottom left from Apex Legends. These are great characters, honestly. There have been a lot of improvement in the way we represent black women. There is more variation when it comes to showing off our hair, although I think there is still much to be done here. You have Master Raven, who is from Tekken also. You have Kimberly from Street Fighter 6, who I absolutely love, and I love her dynamic personality. Colorful also. She's very recent. I think it was only released like this year, right? You have Astra from Valorant, who actually was developed with the help of Letty Arts, which is a video game and animation company here based in Nigeria, I think. Ghana, thank you. Thank you. And then you have my iconic character, Senna, from League of Legends, who I really enjoy, and who is one of the very first black characters I could, let's say, identify to or feel close to when I started playing games. So Senna, I have a personal history with her, because I used to play League of Legends a lot, and like since the beginning, the release of the game, and only 10 years later, they actually released a black woman character. So I'd been playing for 10 years without a character that would kind of look like me. So it really changed something for me to realize that, wow, I actually wasn't in this space before. At least I wasn't being seen in this space before the way I wanted to be. There are good and bad representation in how Afro women, Afro men have been seen, African culture and countries have been seen in the gaming space so far. But I also want to show what it looks like when these games, these characters, are made by us. What's interesting is that we are being shown mostly not only through stereotypes, unfortunately, but also a lot of our cultures are not being seen. We are not seeing our languages, we are not seeing our landscapes, our traditions, our people, our music. sometimes, when it comes to the music, it's becoming a bit appropriative also. I'm thinking of Fortnite and the dances that are being taken also from some black people who are not being retributed for creating these dances, for example, but that's another topic. I want to show you some of the great examples that exist of games that represent Africans and Afro cultures that are made by us. And I do think this makes a difference already. So all of you probably already know about Orion, right? You know Orion, right? Yeah, of course. From Kiro Games, a studio based in Cameroon, they had this idea of making a 2D game, where the lead will be this young king and his woman, his wife, who is also the queen, and they work together in this Afro fantasy world. Orion really proud themselves to have created this first Afro fantasy game that represents African cultures. And before them, that just didn't exist. And we know about this game because we are interested in these topics, but a lot of people don't know about them. They are not mainstream, and yet we need these games to be more and more mainstream. This is one example. I wanted to show you also Legends of Orisha, for those who maybe have heard of it. I think this is also one great example, although the game is still being under development, I think. But it is very promising, at least in terms of texture, character creation, in terms of visual, it looks really promising. But I keep wondering why hasn't the game been out yet? Because they're encountering challenges, and we need to help them, right, to actually get to the bottom of this, because we need this kind of thing to actually be released one day. Last example that you may know of, this is the Wagadu Chronicles. I've actually worked with the team at Twin Drums on this game, mostly on the social media side. And the game is being pre-released. They're releasing an early access, I think, in the beginning of December. And I think it's also a great example because this was made by a Ghanaian/German man who has created a very diverse team to suggest this Afro fantasy world again, where we can create ourselves, we can create different bodies, we can create different shapes, we can create lores, we can create our own stories. And I think this is one of the very good examples of what we should be seeing out there. So these are games this is what games look like when they are made by us. And I think they all look super promising. I wanted to continue this and to conclude actually by saying that I think it's important for us to represent ourselves in the best way possible, and the only way to get there is to actually make our own games, right? Obviously, this is a whole nother topic to actually get access to the funding, to the talent, to the schools, etc. But having this really represents something for us. We need to not repeat the mistakes from other countries, like we were saying earlier. And to do that, we also need to take into account these representation issues. We need to take into account women who are half of the population that can actually contribute to these things. So since the industry is actually booming right now, we need to get them involved as much and as fast as possible so we don't accumulate this lateness, I would say. We need game devs in Africa, in the diaspora, and we obviously need women also because, kids are playing our games. We said that earlier. Kids are growing up playing games for years. The content that they are going to consume really, really matters in how they develop. And it's important for them to be seen on screen. It's important for them to incarnate heroes that will have an impact on them. Role models, I think, are a big deal for kids and for everyone in the world because players are all over the world. So this is what I wanted to tell you, and obviously, if you have any questions, please reach out, by email or Instagram or whatever. I will be here to keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jen.